Sounds good. So I'm very excited to be interviewing Michelle Parise. She is an award-winning journalist, a writer, and performer, and she's worked for the CBC for more than 2 decades in everything from children's television to music programming and documentary making, as well as at the helm of many national radio programs. The daughter of Italian immigrants, Michelle lives in Toronto. Michelle, it's so nice to be here with you.
Hi. Very nice to be here too.
Congratulations.
Here.
Yeah. These times. So why don't we get started with you reading a passage from Alone, a Love Story?
Oh, okay.
Or
do you have a passage you want me to read?
How about just the very opening?
Okay. Sure.
Cool.
Right, here it is. It's called Loss. So here I am on the edge of 39, petulant, drunk, and obsessed with a charming but frustrating man in a white shirt and perfect jeans. I'm taking my 1 millionth fancy cocktail and stumbling down a hallway to go see a tarot card reader. My friends all rolled their eyes, but I like the idea of someone telling me who I am and what my path is based on randomly turned up cards, because seriously, fucked if I know these days. The man with the white shirt is mingling so excellently and effortlessly with my friends. His smile and those dark eyes and that body and those jeans, God, it hurts to look at him too long. He's so handsome, I can hardly stand it sometimes. And whenever he's around, everything softens in me. Usually. Tonight, I'm all edges. I'm being a bit rude to him even. I'll tell you why later. Stick with me. Right now, I'm stumbling down the hallway to see the tarot card reader. She's like 25 max and drinking a gigantic glass of red wine. She locks the door and it's quiet and all fortune-tellery in this closet we're in. I'm drinking my strong, fancy French cocktail as she shuffles the cards and thinking about how this is going to be such bullshit. But it's my birthday, so fun. And then she turns over the first card. Loss. It says loss. More cards come and it's like they're shouting at me. Fear, futility. What the fuck? They may as well say, your husband cheated on you and now you think no one can love you. You used to know exactly who you were, she says. You were stable, confident, but now you have a veil of uncertainty over you. That's because you're being tested to help you figure out how you say yes to things and how you say no. Whoa, how I say yes to things, how I say no, not if, how. It's as if she's telling me I have choices, some control over my life. I know that probably seems obvious to you, but right now, in this year, in this bar, this is news. This bullshit card reading has suddenly become really fucking real. I return to my friends and try to be cheerful. White shirt is there to greet me, all gorgeous and sweet. He's searching my eyes for a sign, but I just say, it was fun. She said freaky things. Inside, I think, fuck, why can't this real thing he says he feels for me be real enough? I wake up the next morning in his bed, my head bashed in by booze I don't even know the name of, my veins filled with lead instead of blood. Hungover, massively. It's my 39th birthday. I look at White Shirt as he lies sleeping, and I already feel far away. How did I get here? I used to be married, for God's sake. What happened to my life? To love. I wonder this all the time now. That's the first little vignette of the book. I'm going to close the window because it's loud outside. Okay.
Well, thank you for reading that. I thought that the opening would be just a good place to start, to set things up for talking more about Alone, a Love Story. So your story is about love and betrayal and learning how to define yourself outside of a relationship. I'm wondering what made you decide to tell this very personal and occasionally quite sad and dark story to the world.
I don't know. I just was writing it. Like I wrote it as it was happening, most of it. And I just kind of always write in short story format anyhow. Sometimes nonfiction, sometimes fiction, sometimes a blend of both. And so this book came out in pretty much the same way. And when I had about 10,000 words or so, I was like, I think this is something. You know what I mean? Like, because I edit other people's writing every day of my life at work. And so I still had the editor brain that was like, I think this is something. And anyone I sent it to, just the feedback was so positive in the sense that, like, it made me realize basically I'm a good fucking writer, and I have a way of articulating these emotions in a really authentic and raw way that maybe other people can articulate. And for that reason alone, I guess I really felt compelled to get it out there, even if, I don't always come off so great in it. And I think that confuses people too. Like, they think that's me now, even because I write in an active voice. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I just think that was why. Basically, I felt compelled to write it so, like, other people who can't articulate things as well or in the same way could have a voice in a way. That sounds pretty lofty, but it's basically the truth.
Yeah, well, you are a good fucking writer, absolutely.
Thank you. That's coming from you. Thanks.
Yeah, and the active voice also does make it feel very, very real and in the moment. And I'm just kind of wondering, this is a writerly question, but
I love that.
Does writing in that active voice kind of transform your relationship to the timeline? Like, did it make the events feel more immediate? And does it make the events feel more immediate now, like in retrospect when you're reading it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that that active voice and staying present to the voice of when I wrote it, and not changing some of the really cringy, embarrassing things that I don't feel at all anymore, because I wanted to stay true to who I was at the time. Like, I think that's really important for the authenticity of the story. Not that anyone cares about the fact-checking the details of my life, like, who cares about my life, but more the reason why I think people connect so strongly with it, whether or not they've gone through the same things, like the same specific story, is that, like, there's an authenticity to the nakedness of the emotion. And if it wasn't kept in that active voice or in that immediacy, like, I think that's part of the magic of it in a way. I don't know. I never studied anything like writing or whatever. So I don't know if there's like a thing I'm doing. I have no idea. I don't know if there's like a technique. But basically it's my sort of like, it might be from my radio journalism background. That active voice is just naturally because I've been writing that way for 24 years. Active voice and short sentences and and very conversational, right? Yeah, that's why it has such a clear voice. Basically, people are like, this sounds exactly like you. If you read it, if you hear me on the podcast, the way I speak, I mean, it's a little bit nicer. But did that answer your question?
It does, because it really is a very conversational experience. And I think that you're right, that it feels as though you're hearing a story from somebody that's talking to you in the same room, across the table with a glass of wine.
Great.
So yeah, so that kind of, for anybody who's watching who isn't familiar, this book was actually produced as a podcast it ran for 3 seasons.
Yeah.
So a beloved CBC podcast that ran for many episodes, and received a lot of attention and acclaim. But the podcast itself was originally the book, right? Yeah. And then, but the book wasn't published until this year. Can you just give a quick rundown of like the chronology of when everything happened?
Yeah, I started writing it the beginning of 2013, like in the moment, and then by 2015, I had a book deal, and then there were some things about the book deal that weren't quite right, and I decided not to take the book deal in the end, and then I was just sitting on this manuscript that I knew was good and in its own way important or whatever, and I really felt compelled to get it out there. And then I was like, oh wait, I'm a radio producer. So then I pitched it to CBC Podcast. I still had to pitch it as a like movie for your ears. I wanted to make the book into a movie, the unpublished book into a movie, but as a podcast. I don't care about what the order of things that you're supposed to do or like how things work. I just was like, this is what I want to do. And so I pitched them. They took 1 season, so 10 episodes. And that was basically I adapted along with Veronica Simmons, the first part of the book, basically. And then every season I had to pitch it again, even though it was a huge hit. And so I did 28 episodes. Roughly the 3 parts of the book were the 3 seasons, except it's in a totally different order because like it's different audio storytelling. And also we never knew if we were going to have another season. So it had to make sense in its own. It's very glamorous. Yeah. You don't make any money and you don't know whether you're going to get picked up again. That's podcasting.
Yeah. The glamorous life.
Oh yeah.
The reason I wanted to make sure that we clarified that chronology is because it seems like it's important for people who may not know to realize that there's some distance between you and the events of the story. I keep on referring to it as the story, but the story of, yeah, it is a story. The story of the disillusion of your marriage and the kind of process of learning to be with yourself and out there in the world and not defined by a relationship, which is, I think, something that so many women experience at some point in our lives. So I guess from there, I would love to ask you whether your relationship to the story has changed since you first wrote it and told it.
Definitely. I mean, as I said a bit earlier, like there was so many things, even 3 years ago when I was recording the podcast, where I was like, this is so embarrassing. I cannot believe I'm going to say these things out loud. Like, I absolutely do not feel this way anymore. But that is how I felt in the moment. And I feel like that's really important. Or there are things where I'm just so whiny or so like navel gazing, or like there's not a lot of like analysis or whatever or progression yet. And you know, when you read when I read bad reviews or whatever, any of the complaints are basically like, she's a great writer, but like she needs to go to a psychologist. And it's like, yeah, okay. Like this is not a self-help book. I don't know why people think that maybe that's what it's supposed to be. I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do. It's not going to be all tied up with a nice bow at the end. Like I'm not Julia Roberts and Eat, Pray, Love. It's just life, and life is stupid and bumpy and embarrassing and full of mistakes, right? So like, why wouldn't I write the mistakes? Who would care, first of all, about my life if it was like, and you know, who cares about my life anyway? But the reason people do care is because it reminds them of themselves, because they themselves are flawed, right? Like we're fallible. Human beings are fallible, men, women, everybody, right? And people fall in love and people want to leave partnerships, whether they're still in love with the person or not. Like that's okay. Like these are things that, well, you wrote a whole book about that. That's life, right? And we grieve, and we grieve in weird, different ways. Everybody's different. That's what it's about. Yeah, that's why I wanted to do it. But for sure, don't worry, everyone. I go to a psychologist. Like I've worked some of the stuff out.
Oh, I love that. The concern trolling, excellent. So here's a question that somebody's asked in the chat room. It's so interesting how genre, media, and form shape writing. Would the book have been different without the podcast? That's a good question.
The book have been different without the podcast. I don't think so. They're kind of like, they're so intertwined now for me. And also the other third medium is me, right? Like to me, they're all just vehicles, right? Like the story is the story. I chose to write it in a book. I chose to adapt it into a podcast. It's still me. I'm performing the podcast, doing all the different voices I had to do, like drunk Michelle inside voice, whatever, like all these different, my ex-husband's voice, all these different things. In the end, it's still me, and the voice, the writing voice is my voice. So I don't think that they would be different, to boringly answer your question, person on the chat.
I think it's a good question, especially given the unique process of your book coming to life. Getting more into the themes within the book themselves, one thing that is kind of I think the central premise or the central theme within your story is that you had to find a way to break free from doing the things that you sort of thought you needed to do as a person who, as a woman in the world and somebody who loved being in love and in relationships, and didn't even necessarily realize at the time that you felt compelled to do them for reasons other than yourself, like the church wedding, buying a house, all these things that you describe as sort of going along with because it was what was expected. Tell me a little bit more about just that, navigating that as a central theme.
Yeah, I think it's important because, now I'm 45, right? Or I'm almost like 46. And when I got married, I was 27. And I don't know, like I feel like I was still in a stage then that, although I was very independent, I had lived on my own since I was 19 and like the thing is there was still this how life goes thing that is like, maybe it's partly cultural or family and also my ex-husband was also in this kind of like, here's the order that we do things. We had other relationships. We found each other. This is the one. We get married. We buy a condo. We get pregnant. We buy a house. He has an affair. We have a divorce. That's how it goes, I guess, right? Like that was the order of things. But along the way, there were many times where the two of us realized like, oh, we both like hated having that house. And like, I missed living downtown so much and I never really wanted to have a baby. I love my child, but like, I really didn't want to. And I talk a lot about that in the book. Yeah, I just sort of went along. And then somewhere around like 43, so just like in the past couple of years, I'm like, I'm super done with doing all the things I'm supposed to do. I don't know. I'm over it. Early menopause just like super changed my brain. Where I'm just like, oh, I'm only actually going to do things the way I want to. Not that I'm beyond compromising, but I forgot your question now. Sorry.
I think just, yeah, doing things because you think they're supposed to be done in that way for gendered reasons and just cultural, social.
And it's not unromantic. It's not that we weren't in love. It's not that we didn't want to get married. It's not because he had an affair 12 years later that he never meant it, you know, when we got married. Like, of course he did, right? Like, there was, like, this is how human beings are. We change over time, right? It doesn't hurt any less, right? So that was basically the point. I think if anyone reads the book, you could see that it's actually not very judgmental at all. Maybe not at all, but it's not too judgmental. Like, my point is not to like martyr myself as this victim of the unholy infidelity, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't the point. I hope nobody got that out of it. Yeah. But once I did get married, I wanted to be married. I took it very seriously. And I just would have rather, you know, I understand that people don't want to be married anymore. Like, that's cool. Like, let's just break up without having an affair and like years of lies. I prefer without that part.
Yeah. Ideal. I can understand that. We have another question from the crowd. And that is, how do you remember your past? How important is the accuracy of your life events to you and the story?
I love this question. Okay, it's really important to me because I'm a journalist, so I cannot write, not even this memoir, this like book about myself where I could basically say anything, like, but it was so important for me to fact check. I had to fact check all kinds of things. And I think that's really important, even when it's a true story. And so I don't really remember the past, like none of us do. I mean, and there's millions of studies and a great Nature of Things documentary about how we all actually don't remember anything, apparently, correctly. I write everything down as it happens, or not everything, but many things. So almost everything in the book was already written down somewhere. And so when I went to write the book, I already had it, you know, I've got calendars, I've got notebooks. I would just write things on backs of envelopes and receipts and stuff like that. And TTC, one whole story in the book is written on the back of 6 TTC transfers and like stuff like that.
That's amazing.
Transfers, remember transfers? And that's how long I was writing this book. And so for me, the accuracy is important. In so far as I can do it. And the other answer to that question would be, that is why I don't try to guess at what any of the other characters are thinking or feeling. So you'll see that in the book, there's never a like attempt to understand, you know, my ex-husband's very complicated set of reasons and emotions and his own pathologies or whatever. Like, that's his story to tell, not mine. And so I take that very seriously also in terms of accuracy. If that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. What was the process of fact checking your own history?
You know, I would just write things or have something in my head, and then certain things I would realize, like, maybe I need to go back and look at the full thing I originally had written, or just to see if there are any, or was that really, and like, you know, people would think it's not important, like, who cares if it was September 21st or whatever it was. And, but then when I would go back, I would find things that maybe I wouldn't have remembered. And like one of them that's in the book and in the podcast is this like beautiful scene of a flight. Like, we're having this like huge argument just on the precipice of me finding out about the affair, which I call the bomb. And we have this fight in the kitchen, and I had written the thing, but then when I went back to my notes, it was like parsley, like he had flipped, you know, the cutting board that was full of chopped parsley, and the parsley had gone all in the air and fallen all down. And then I ended up writing that in into the story, but I didn't remember the parsley. And then it was beautiful, like this, like whatever, I can't even remember what the line is, but like whatever, snowflakes, like these green snowflakes are falling all over all of us and the babies on the floor, like, you know, with parsley falling like snowflakes in the kitchen. And if I didn't fact check whatever else I was fact checking, I wouldn't have found that little detail. So I do think details like that can really add to it, and they're authentic. I didn't have to make up the parsley snowflakes. It really was. But I certainly didn't remember that. Like I had no memory of it.
Yeah, and that's a memorable moment for sure. Cinematic, tragic.
Cinematic. Yeah.
Irby. So I'm also just wondering another, we probably don't have time for too many more questions, but what you've told the story a lot. Like a lot of people have heard it and read it by this point. And what, if anything, stands out as a takeaway or detail that audiences have really latched onto?
I feel like because whether or not people have had this specific, you know, experience of infidelity, for example, that everyone has still experienced loss and grief and disappointment or feeling betrayed by someone they trusted the most, or et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a lot of I've gotten not millions, but like so hundreds of messages and letters, physical letters from all over the world where people are like, that reminded me of the time. And then they explain some totally different thing. And that just makes me so happy in a weird way, like happy that I'm able to like connect with people, even though the specific isn't the same. One thing I noticed is that like a lot of men, have said, like, they've all pointed out the very similar scene. They're like, that scene where the husband is watching TV and you're standing in the doorway trying to get him to come to bed and he just ignores you. Like, oh my God. Like so many different men have either written to me about that or said that to me in person. And like, I feel like they caught a glimpse of themselves maybe. And it seems to say that it made them realize like, and turn to their partners more because of that particular, which is like 2 lines in a whole big long thing, right? So for whatever reason, they found themselves there, which is, I think, what happens. People keep finding themselves in this book, like in different places. I mean, we have no time, right? But like, there's like all the stuff about motherhood and that whole thing. It's not just about infidelity and then all the dating stuff. Oh my God. You and I could talk about that forever, I think.
We sure could. Yeah, there's a lot going on. Absolutely. One really, really quick final question before we get kicked off. How has your relationship to love changed?
Good question. I think that it's very evident in the book, and to anyone who knows me, that I'm the saddest optimist, as I call myself. Like I always very much clung to hope and love. I love being in love, but I also don't need it, of course, but I do love it. And I think I just over time definitely got comfortable with myself. I didn't need to numb myself with alcohol or one night stands or all that. That was a very specific and very short, it was like a year and a half. So that hasn't persisted. Like that was just a really specific way that I dealt with grief. And yeah, because I felt like I was made a fool of by love, kind of like I did everything I was supposed to do, and I still got, knocked over. So I think, and then I went, for like all those many years, like chasing after half love or partial or not the kind of love that I needed anyway. So once you are okay with yourself, here's the eat, pray, love ending. Once I was like, I'm fine alone. It's cool. And then I did fall in love. So again, so now I have a partner and we're going to get married.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
And on that happy note, thank you so much, Michelle. It's been just a wonderful pleasure and a treat to speak with you and read your story.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Kelli and Michelle. You can purchase Alone, a Love Story through Another Story Bookshop, either in the Watts digital marketplace or at anotherstory.ca. And before I introduce our next discussion, I'm going to bring on Lena Suksi for a special 5-minute poetry reading.